Hello and welcome to the John Ark Show. On today's episode, we're going to interview media mogul and Hollywood super producer Larry Namer. He's the co-founder of the E! Entertainment television network, which today is worth more than $5 billion with a B dollars. He's also produced countless other successful shows and projects over the years. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to subscribe to our channel for free. You can also like, comment, and follow us. We're going to have a lot of great celebrity interviews coming up, so make sure to click on the notification bell so you can be notified every time we upload a new episode. Also, we ask that you post a link to today's show on all your social media to help spread the word. Now, let's say hello to Larry Namer. Hello, Larry. Welcome to the John Ark Show. How are you today, sir?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's our pleasure, believe me. Larry, countless people try and break into the entertainment industry and fail each year, yet you managed to accomplish an entree into the industry on a spectacular level. Can you briefly give us some background about yourself and how you became involved in both the entertainment space and the technology sector?
Sure. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Family, Turkey on my father's side, Russia on my mother's side. And, they were very typical World War II immigrant parents, wanted me to get a civil service job so I can get a pension and, be secure for the rest of my life and all of that. For whatever reason, I chose not to go that path. But I went to school. I got a degree in economics from Brooklyn College. And when I got out of school, the city of New York had a big budget crisis, and they weren't hiring any teachers or anybody else into the civil service thing. So I ended up getting what I thought would be a temporary job in a company that was called Sterling Manhattan Cable TV, which was one of the very early cable companies in the country, and certainly one of the first major urban system cable companies. But they gave me a job working as an assistant underground splicer, which meant I worked in the sewers of New York, putting the cables together, and they paid me $90 a week. It turned out to be quite a good place to be there because Time Incorporated, which at that point was basically a publishing company, had bought the cable company, and they wanted to transform Time from being a print company into a media company over a 10-year period. So it turned out to be a great time to be there because we got to start Urban Cable and HBO and Cinemax, and we did lots of acquisitions. And, within that 10-year period, Time became the biggest cable operator in the country, at that time. But I had risen, kind of gone up the ranks very quickly and became the director of operations. So pretty much all the technical operations in Manhattan, from construction to service to installation, all reported to me. So I understood the very intricacies of the cable system business. And then I got recruited to go out to California, where all of a sudden all the big cities wanted to put cable in, because they realized that was kind of going to be the future. But they wanted the cable to go underground. Well, I was fortunate in that I had built the only underground cable system in the US. And, so at the ripe old age of 30, I got recruited to come out to LA and build the first two-way interactive big city cable system in the country, which I did. And, so I understood the mentality of being a cable operator really well. So when my partner Alan and I wanted to, we came up with the idea for E!, which originally was called Movie Time. We were very fortunate in that in order to get investor money, you had to first get a few cable operators to say yes. And since I came out of that world, I knew how to speak their language. So I managed to get a few cable operators to say, okay, if you do it, we understand why we would benefit by carrying it. And from that, we managed to raise a little bit of money, and being a little bit naive, we just took a little bit of money and went on the air. And as soon as that happened, that was after 3.5 years of looking for money. Everybody just said, "Oh, you should have told us that's what you want to do. We would have given you that money a few years ago." So, that was kind of it.
Now, there are a lot of cable employees out there, and almost none of them ascend to your heights, to the level which you ascended, and as quickly as you did. What was it about about you that caused you to ascend so quickly? Was it salesmanship? Was it technical proficiency? Was it a high IQ? Was God just blessing you and opening doors in your path every 5 minutes? What was going on?
It's probably a combination of all of those things. Growing up in the cable business in the Time Inc. world was very fortunate in that you really learned the very fundamentals of the business, and how cable operators operate and how they're measured. Understanding how a cable operator gets a bonus was important, because then we could pitch our network to show them how we can help them hit the kind of numbers they needed to get their bonuses and stuff. So we spoke to them on a very, very practical level. But, then, a lot of it comes from the way I grew up. My father was a Pepsi Cola truck driver, which I did not aspire to become one. And my mom worked for the Department of Social Services in New York, which I didn't aspire to become one of those. And, when I came out here to build this cable system, everybody out here, goes to the Oscars and all the award shows and the premieres and the red carpet stuff. And, being a Brooklyn kid, and seeing, all these celebrities and things like that, I said, you know what, I want to be able to go to those. And when I spoke to the studios, I said, how do I get on the list to go to all those parties and premieres? And they said, well, you're really more in the telephone business than you're in the entertainment business. So no. And, I went back to the marketing guys and said, okay, listen. And I did all this with my partner, Alan Marufka, and who was a friend from New York. But, when I spoke to the marketing guys, I said, listen, the most effective marketing vehicle that you have is the movie trailer, which makes me want to see a movie. I said, but the only time I ever see the movie trailer is when I'm already in the movies. I said, it seems kind of backwards that, you're not showing me these things in my home to make me want to get out of my living room and go to the movies. And their answer was, well, we really can't afford to buy 2 minutes of TV time. So I said, okay, great. I have all these extra channels that I built. I'll put your movie trailers on television. I'll create a trailer channel on Valley Cable. And, but you got to put me on all your lists. And they said, sure, if you're going to give us free advertising for our trailers, we'll put you on the list. And, so we were getting all the 2-minute trailers from all the movies. And, typically those trailers are better than a lot of the movies themselves. And when we started to do some audience research, said, what's your favorite channel? And they go, oh, I love CNN and I love MTV and I love that trailer channel. Well, when the company I worked for sold out and went back to Toronto, I was not about to leave California to go to another place where it snows. So Alan and I just came up with this idea. When we started out saying, if we're going to get all these movie trailers for free, it's no different than MTV getting music videos for free. They stood a host in front of a green screen and said, and Madonna has a new video. We said, very easy for us to stand a host in front of a green screen and go, and Schwarzenegger has a new movie. So we came up with a very rational economic foundation for starting a TV network, which was basically getting amazingly high quality content for literally no money. We managed, at that time, the going rate to start a TV network was somewhere between 60 and 100 million. And Alan and I realized nobody was giving us anywhere near that amount of money, but we finally found a bond house on Wall Street, excuse me, that said, that they would give us $2.5 million. And we were like, what do we do with $2.5 million? And we finally just said, you know what, we'll take $2.5 million and we'll figure the rest out. And they did that. And I called a friend who was teaching radio, television, film at University of Texas in Austin. And I said, you have a bunch of kids who need intern jobs. And he sent us 31 interns. And he literally started with 11 employees and 31 interns. And then when it went on the air, I mean, everybody loves, Hollywood movies and Hollywood gossip and celebrities. And so it traveled around the world really quickly. So in that very first year, we were the fastest growing TV network in America. And we had already grown to 14 other countries. So,
it all seems to make perfect sense now, but you were the first guy to connect the dots in the beginning. And that says something.
Yeah, well, what it was, I had this background in dealing with the studios on the movie trailers, which were the initial foundation to get it going. But, Alan and I looked at it and said, you know what? At that point, cable TV was we said it's an electronic newspaper. CNN is the headline, ESPN is the sports, home shopping are the ads. We said, but what's noticeably missing is the second most read section in any newspaper, which was the entertainment pages. And so that's what we set out to become, was the entertainment pages of the cable TV newspaper.
So we've watched some of your other interviews, and one thing I'm noticing over and over about you is that you're very quick to share credit for founding the company with Alan, your partner. And that seems to be very contrary to what I see happening with a lot of other producers and executives in the industry. Everybody is so quick to try to grab all the credit for everything they had very little to do with. So I think that says something about you as well. You seem to have that that willingness to share the credit, and I think that's probably a component of your success. And also, you being raised in Brooklyn, you probably became a little hungrier and more ambitious than somebody who wasn't raised in Brooklyn.
Oh yeah, I grew up it was before Brooklyn was trendy Brooklyn. Now it's trendy Brooklyn. Yeah. But when I grew up in an area called Coney Island, which was the hood, still is the hood. It's a lower class neighborhood, and but it was great. We didn't realize we were poor, so everything was great. My parents were great, and then growing up there was great, and we had great friends, great food. Just I had a great childhood.
I'll tell you something funny. I grew up in one of the most violent cities in the world. And now, years later, I have more than 100 celebrities on my payroll. So I think there's something about the early days which forges you in a special way. It has an effect.
Yeah, my parents, were a great example. The World War II immigrant things. They would work 2 or 3 jobs. They were really hell bent on making sure that their children would have a better life than they did. And, that was the example that I had to follow.
So how were you able to make E! Entertainment such a powerhouse at the time? Was it that incredible time slot? Didn't you guys have a great time slot back in the day, like 7 o'clock, 7 p.m. or something? Was that a part of the success?
No, we were actually on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We were a full cable network, so we were always on. But what we did, and again, this is kind of interesting. We only had $2.5 million, and we didn't have a lot of employees. So we really thought very long and hard on how do we use our $2.5 million? And we realized that we weren't going to be able to do fancy production or anything like that at the beginning. And we first decided that we were going to put all our eggs in finding hosts that people could relate to, that either loved or hated. They didn't have to love them. They could hate them too, as long as they felt something emotionally for them. And my model for that was the Mickey Mouse Club. I grew up watching the Mickey Mouse Club. I would rush home from school, and I wouldn't know what was on that day, but I knew I loved spending time with those kids. And then it made it a very pleasurable thing. So we said we're going to put all our money into finding hosts that become the Mickey Mouse Club the cable world here. And we actually put over 7,000 people on tape to find the first five. And that turned out to be the smartest thing we did because, and everybody says to me, they go, oh, you were so lucky you had all those great hosts. You had Greg Kinnear, who went on to Academy Award, and Julie Moran, the hosted Entertainment Tonight, the first woman ever to host Wide World of Sports, and Katie Wagner, who did Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. Mark DiCarlo did Studs. That was not an accident. We really spent a lot of time and every dollar we had to dig out those hosts, and they all went on to have spectacular careers. And so it turned out we were very right. That was the smartest thing we did. And then when we had a little bit of traction, we had some audience and we had some sponsors, we started doing like real shows. And the first one was Talk Soup. And because our attitude, Alan and I had a very different attitude. Everybody would take Hollywood so seriously, like they were doing rocket science. We just said, Hollywood is not worthy of being that serious. You got to look at, it's supposed to be entertaining. Let's treat it that way. So, the first show that broke through was Talk Soup. And when we first talked to our programming folks about it, they went, you guys are crazy. You want to do a TV show that makes fun of TV shows. And we were like, exactly, that's what we want to do. And, we had Greg Kinnear host it, and people were just amazed, that here was a TV show that was making fun of what's on television. They couldn't believe we were doing it. And they would tell their friends, and our audience would build. And, then we finally got to the point where, we had our own programming team in-house, and we applied to get into the Academy Awards as a press, to get on the red carpet. We were turned down. And they said, you guys are some little cable network, no, you can't get press passes. Well, being, the Brooklyn kid that I am, we literally went behind the where it was, and we climbed over the fence. And we were walking on the red carpet, filming people, and starting to talk about, oh, what are you wearing? And, whose dress is that? And stuff like that, until security caught us and threw us out. But when people watched it, they went crazy for it. They said, that was amazing. We thought you took us in a place we're not supposed to be. Well, the reality was we were in a place we weren't supposed to be. So we had that very pirate nature. We couldn't afford, the best equipment and stuff. We actually bought used industrial equipment. And the whole thing looked like we were taking you into a world that you're really not supposed to be seeing. And that's really what endeared us to a lot of people.
You mentioned looking for financing for 3 years. And that reminds me of Walt Disney when he was trying to fund Disneyland in California. He said he applied to over 250 banks. Now, back then, there were hundreds of banks. Now it's just, the monster banks. 250 loan applications. And back then you had to go to the bank, sit down and be interviewed by the loan officer. And I think he got the loan for Disney at like 256 or something unbelievable number of applications and interviews. When you were trying to secure funding on Wall Street, you're doing it for a year, then a 2, then you're at 2.5 years. At some point, you have to start wondering, is this going to work? What kept you going? What caused you to believe that this would work?
Well, in the case of Movie Time E, we just knew we were on the right track. And what was holding us back was not so much that the idea wasn't good, but it was people didn't believe that, 2 kids from the East Coast could wake up in the morning and start a TV network. I mean, it was unheard of. And people would say to us, well, you're not Rupert Murdoch, you're not Ted Turner, you're not Time Warner. You don't just start TV networks. That's not the way it works in this country, in this world. And we were just going, we don't understand why not. The idea is so good, and we know we could do it. And we're like now, ingrained in that Hollywood community, and we think we have the right sensibility and how to approach the audience. So, we just kept going at it. And, like I say, and finally, we got a little bit of money, and we were very smart with how we dealt with that little money that we had. We put it in the right place.
Now, eventually you sold E Entertainment to Comcast, but you remained on the board. You then started a media company in Russia called Comspan Communications, which produced several hundred rock concerts. And you even brought a soap opera called Santa Barbara to Russia. Tell us about doing business in Russia back then. What attracted you to it, and how challenging was it to do business there?
Well, a friend of mine who was a lawyer in LA had some clients that were doing some merchant banking. It was just when you could kind of see the Soviet Union was unraveling, and that that world was changing. And somebody approached these merchant bankers with an idea for an entertainment company in Russia. And their lawyer was the same as my lawyer. And they went to him, and so he called me up and said, "Larry, do you want to go to Russia and tell me if you think this is real?" And I was like, wow, that's amazing. I mean, I never thought in a million years I would ever be able to go to Russia. So I went with them, and we spent a lot of time in St. Petersburg as opposed to Moscow. And I met the mayor of St. Petersburg, very, very nice guy who was one of the reform people there. And he, was very good to me and us. And he asked me if I would help him start a charity concert series to raise money for the orphanage and children's hospital. Because when the Soviet Union fell apart, all that money that was coming out of Moscow to support, old elderly people or children just dried up, and these kids were literally starving. So, I said, well, I'm not really in the music business, but I probably know more than you do. So yeah, sure, I'll help you. And we started a concert series there called the White Nights Festival, which still goes. It's now 31 years. It's still going, raising money for the hospital and the orphanage. And it's a 6-day festival from June 16th to June 21st. June 21st being the longest day of the year. Therefore, it's called White Nights. We just were running that. And then, the people that I met there said, hey, why don't you start a company here and, do like regular concerts, not just the charity thing. And I was like, well, I don't really do that. And they said, well, when you needed our help on your charity, you did it. And I said, oh, okay. So we started out in the concert business. Then we bought Santa Barbara there, which was a huge, huge hit. I mean, Santa Barbara, when it was on, would get 80% of all people watching television watch Santa Barbara. It was mind-boggling. And, very possibly influenced why, Russia and the Soviet Union changed, in that, people were watching it and really looking beyond the characters and going, hey, all the stuff that we were told about you guys for 72 years, turns out that we were BS and stuff. So it had a lot of social impact as well as just entertainment value. And, we started bringing tennis tournaments there. We brought the Harlem Globetrotters there. So we were a pretty well-rounded entertainment company there. Very difficult at the beginning to do stuff because they were just transitioning from that communist mentality. So there weren't a lot of people that would have entrepreneurial or capitalist kind of minds there. And you had a lot of crime and corruption and stuff like that. So it was challenging, but, growing up on the streets of Coney Island, it didn't scare me away.
Yeah, well, I remember when it was transitioning, and at one point you could sell an American pair of Levi's in Eastern Europe for what would be their annual salary. My mother used to ship clothes, Levi's for example, to her sister who still resided in Poland. And with those jeans, she was able to sell them and build a 3-story brick house. Think about that. People think Bitcoin's a big deal now. It doesn't compare to jeans back in the day.
Yeah, it was crazy. Jeans and the currency of choice was really Marlboro cigarettes. I mean, I could need a taxi and stand on the corner and hold my pack of Marlboro up, and sure enough, somebody would stop and pick me up, and I'd give them 2 cigarettes, and they would take me wherever I needed to. That was the early day Uber.
Yeah. So now, with the economic sanctions against Russia, it's become very difficult to do business with them. In fact, McDonald's just had Russia close all of their McDonald's location, and because of that, they lost 9% of their market share worldwide. Russia comprised 9% of McDonald's market share around the world. So it's a dramatic hit.
Yep.
With this sort of effect, with this sort of sanctioning effect, how much more challenging do you think it's going to be to do business on an entertainment level with entertainment projects going forward with Russia for the next year or two?
I think it's impossible. I don't see the sanctions being lifted that quickly. I don't see the Russians backing out of the Ukraine that quickly and stuff. So I do not have Russia on my radar for entertainment-related activities for the next at least 2 to 3 years.
So you're also serving as the CEO of a company called Matan. It produces a weekly series called Hello Hollywood that is tailored to the Chinese audience. Tell us about the challenges and complexities of doing business in China.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting because it does tie back to the Russian thing. So I had, I was married to a Russian gal who I met, from doing business there. And, just so happened her uncle was Leonid Brezhnev, who was the head of Russia for like 25 years. And so when we divorced, I said, look, it's your country, your family's still there. You take the Russia company. So she took our span. And I just went back to doing my stuff in the US. And then it was interesting because the Chinese government realized that in order to build a consumer economy, you have to let Western marketers in, because what people really coveted to buy were Western consumer goods, particularly luxury goods. And so they realized that media regulation needed a change. And they looked at the Russian model, and they went to the Russians and said, we love the way you've done your post-communist reform media. Would you help us? And the Russians said, no. The guy who did it for us lives in LA. Here's his phone number. Give him a call. So I ended up getting called by the Chinese government to come in there, and I worked, initially with young TV executives, teaching them, as they described it. I was teaching the process of creativity for profit, which is an odd way of saying it, but basically was how you transition from that Communist Party dominated to something where people actually had to watch it and you had to get sponsorship money, et cetera. So in terms of doing business, I found China much easier. In that it was certainly more organized. I mean, Russia was a fairly chaotic during that period of time. You had political turmoil there, as well as economic changes. China was just economic changes and stuff. Everything was very organized. So even though it wasn't identical to the things I was used to, it was orderly and you could figure it out. So China's been a pleasure on that level.
All things being equal, is doing business in China more or less lucrative than doing the same project in the US would be?
2 parts of the answer. Number one, the prices of things are certainly less in China than I would get for a project here in the US. But then again, my costs are a lot less. So at the end of the day, if you just look at stuff and you look at profit margin percentages and stuff, my Chinese stuff is more profitable on a percentage basis than things I do in the US. But it's not hard to change, the dynamic, and you can do stuff in China that I was never allowed to do here. I mean, here we have so much legacy business dealing and the way we do business and technology and stuff. In China, it was all brand new. There was no brand loyalties there. I mean, here, if I go to Pepsi with an idea that's kind of an oddball idea, they would look at it and go, well, it would be a big chance. And, even if you're right, maybe you could change market share 1/100th of 1%. And it's really, the upside for us is not enough to invest in something, that we think is a little bit off the beaten track. In China, when I come up with odd ideas, and I did a big project for Bacardi, the liquor company there, you could swing the needle 3, 4, 5 percentage points of market share. And when you measure that against 1.3 billion people, the upside is enormous. So the brands are willing to take much more aggressive stances on new ideas there. Example is one of the projects we did, we actually had one of the girls wears great shoes. Oh, those are great shoes. She buys it. Says, I buy them on sparkle.com. Well, we actually own sparkle.com. And we did a Shoe of the Month club there. And we made more money selling shoes than we made on a TV show. You could never do that kind of stuff in the US because the networks are so ingrained in the way they've been doing business for the last 60 years. They don't allow you to be that adventurous.
Does an American producer have to give the Chinese government a majority ownership stake in your project?
No, absolutely not. We have never been asked to have to give up any percentage to the government. In the 12 years that we've been there, we've been censored once. And it was for the craziest thing. We wanted to do a TV show. It was when all of a sudden pets were becoming a big deal, particularly in Beijing and Shanghai. And people were like buying these really fancy dogs and were putting diamond things around their neck and stuff. So we wanted to do a show about vanity animals, and the government shut us down on that one.
Really?
Yeah. And it was interesting because you do it, so I get called in and I talk to them and they say, look, you guys in the West think that everything in China is so prosperous. So while, 300 million people now have money to spend, there are 1 billion people that don't have money, that are poor. And we don't want you showing people they should be spending money on buying a sweater for their dog when they should be spending money on feeding or educating their kids. And you know what? I said, I get it. You're right. And, there are so many other opportunities there. We didn't want to argue. We said, okay, how about, home improvement show? And they went, much better. Go ahead. So, we haven't really banged our head against the wall there.
What's most important to the Chinese? Is it getting a hit TV show or being able to learn as much from you as possible about the entertainment production process so that they could go on to produce their own hits?
Initially, it was certainly about learning from us. And I would say, we've been there 12 years. For the first 7 or 8 years, they just wanted to learn best practices. They wanted to learn how you come up with ideas and test ideas and, all the things that go into, typical Western media thing. Now they've got a pretty robust industry of their own. And they're turning out some good stuff that's made specifically for their audiences and stuff. So now it's more about building hits and getting sponsors and making money and stuff like that. They've kind of learned all the basics, so they're past that point already.
Now, in 2018, you also created a reality series called The Bruce Lee Project, which partnered you with Keanu Reeves and Bruce Lee's daughter, Shannon Lee. The series debuted in both China and India in early 2018. Has that ever been shown in the West or in the United States?
No, COVID hit, and that was going to be a show that was kind of like Survivor. There would be different versions for each country. But then COVID hit and we had to put the whole thing on hold. So
Gotcha. So tell me about, I assume you did some preliminary work with Keanu and Shannon Lee. How are they to work with?
They were great. Shannon, Bruce died when Shannon was only 2. So she only knew of her father, but didn't really get to know him, on a personal level and stuff. But Shannon was just hell-bent on preserving her father's legacy and the things that Bruce was about. Bruce was really not so much about being the toughest guy on the block. Bruce's whole thing was being about the best you can be, really digging within yourself and stuff like that. And he was very much, Bruce was environmentalist. And before, people knew what environmentalists were, he was into, be good to your neighbors, be good to the planet, be good to your, the animals and stuff like that. So Shannon's very much about that. Keanu, on the other, is again very, very, much into the same thing. If you really look at Keanu, he gives a ton of money away to charities and stuff, and he's the nicest, just the sweetest, nicest guy to work with. No ego out there. He's just a good guy.
I've always been a huge as a kid, I've always been a huge Bruce Lee fan. I've met a couple of the cast members of Enter the Dragon. So for some reason, even though I work with a lot of celebrities now, that's business. But as a child, when you get that impressed by Bruce Lee, it somehow resonates with you for the rest of your life. Yeah. So I have watched, I've never worked with Keanu, but every time I see him being interviewed, he seems very dignified, reasonable, rational, and professional. Did you get that same impression working with him behind the camera?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolute pleasure. There was like no egotistical, stuff, there. Keanu was just, he would only get involved in things he really believed in. And when he believed in something, he was just such a pleasure to work. He never did projects just for the money. That was not Keanu.
I've never seen a story about him misbehaving somewhere out in public, vomiting in front of a nightclub or any of that nonsense. He's not getting 27 different women pregnant, all that insanity that the industry is so famous for. So I think that, that speaks well of him.
Yep.
If the Chinese invade Taiwan, then many people expect the relationship between China and America would become extremely problematic, maybe even as bad as the relationship between Russia and the United States. If that happens, do you think the entertainment industry will continue working on projects with China, or is that going to just splash cold water on everything?
My gut feel is the industry will continue to work with China. I mean, at the end of the day, you look at it, China has now surpassed the US in terms of box office revenue. So I don't see the US players, most of which are public companies, saying goodbye to their biggest customer in the world. I just don't think that's what's going to happen.
I read an article, you probably saw it as well. I think it was Variety, if I'm not mistaken. They did an article on how some of the top talent agencies have now decided that they're getting very little benefit by doing these deals, these motion picture distribution deals with the Chinese. And because of that, they're going to slowly pull away. Have you heard about that? What are your thoughts?
I've heard about that. It sounds good on paper, but I don't see anybody pulling their product from Chinese screens. There's just so much money involved there that, so maybe you're not getting the best deal. So, on a typical split, you're getting somewhere between 38 and 42%. And, maybe they're used to 50%, but you know what? 42% on 1.3 billion people is still a heck of a lot of money. And, if you've got a deal going where you're going to get Chinese distribution, meaning you became part of the quota, you pretty much can satisfy your investors that, their risk level has been taken incredibly far down and stuff. So they're, tough negotiators. They have the way that they do business, and you're not getting the same percentages and margins that you get here. But again, when you measure it against the size of that country, it's still a heck of a lot of money.
The taxation problem in California seems to be getting worse all the time. A lot of celebrities I know have left the state. Do you foresee yourself continuing to live and do business in California, or are you thinking about maybe moving elsewhere and just working remotely to avoid California taxes?
I like LA. My kids are here and stuff, and they've grown up here, and they're not moving. So, I want to be next to the family and the kids. So chances of me moving are not good. But I will say that over the last few years, and I don't just mean COVID, I thought the quality of life in Los Angeles in particular has gone down a lot. And for the first time ever, I've thought about, do I really want to be here, or should I move someplace better? And again, the family stuff and the business stuff keeps me here. I'm hoping that with our change of mayor, that, you know, somebody's going to deal with the homeless problem. I mean, I think you got to deal with it, you know, in some sane and rational way. While I'm not, you know, not empathetic about, you know, the homeless problems, we got to face the fact that it's a problem, and we got to do something one way or another. The people that need help, we got to help, and the people that don't want help, we got to do something to get them off the street, because you can't have 99.5% of the people who are working hard and that own houses and own business suffering, you know, because there's a problem that our governments have not really faced. So I think change of mayor should help. And they got to face, you know, to me, the number one problem in LA is homeless right now.
So as a producer, I first began by working for Oprah, and then I went on to do my own things. You know, I develop a lot of innovative television content, online platforms, projects of all sorts. Innovation has always been a big priority for me. What has been your greatest success? Has it been taking original content, developing it, and bringing it to market? Or do you like to license existing hits and take them to foreign markets? What is your...
It's really creating original, and not just original content, but original business models, because we've done that very successfully. You know, if you look at my background, I'm an unusual animal in Hollywood. You know, most people are, you're either the business guy that came out of Harvard or Yale or Stanford, or you're the creative guy that came out of USC or NYU Film School. I graduated, my degree is in economics. I had a deep background on the running technical operations in Manhattan Cable and then Valley Cable. And, you know, then I had the opportunity at E to really stretch myself creatively. You know, the other thing that was really, really good for me, there was a time for 2 years, I was actually the primary consultant to Bill Gates and Microsoft for interactive TV strategy. So I got to really dive deeply into how the tech side can fundamentally change the economics of the media and entertainment world. So you put all those things together, there aren't very many people out here that, you know, bring that wide set of skills together.
You know, there are now a number of television streaming services in the marketplace which are exerting tremendous influence on the entertainment industry. Have you done any business with Netflix or Hulu or Amazon? And if so, what was the experience like? And I ask this because Netflix reportedly does not pay any back end to most producers or actors. What you get up front from them is all you're going to get. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the answer is yes. We've dealt with just about all of them. And I would say Netflix is the hardest to deal with. I mean, they're the, you know, they're the elephant in the room. They're the monster. But so if you're a kind of a starting out producer, you could go in there with a project, and if they like it and they want to commission it, they'll let you take a producer fee, you know, which is usually pretty decent. If they know you as an experienced producer, they'll let you take a higher fee and stuff. But you're right, that's it. You know, they own the project, they own the ancillary, they own the remakes, they own the worldwide, they own everything, and you were essentially just work for hire. The way around that, and you know, as Netflix gets bigger and their budgets get bigger, you can do things very similar to bring in the kind of financing that you used to do in the movie business. You could bring to the TV series business, in that I can go out and finance a project myself, make it, and then go to Netflix after it's done, where I don't need Netflix's money. And I could say, okay, guys, I'm willing to license you this for 2 years at 50% of what it costs to make. But then all the rights remain with me.
Did you say 15 or 50?
50, 50, for 40, 50, 60%, depends on how much they like it. So you license to them, but then you retain the rights so that if it's great, you've got, further seasons, you've got merchandising, you've got foreign sales, you've got syndication. So it kind of goes back to the way the TV business used to be, where you had independent companies that would go and make product and then go out and sell them, license them to TV networks.
So I see you were involved with a company called Fanvester that helps celebrities raise capital for their projects. Did you start that before COVID or after COVID? And did COVID have an effect on that?
That started right as COVID. I was not the originator of there. There's a guy actually from the Ukraine who started it. And it was really to take celebrity-driven business projects that were not their main business line. So wouldn't be making films, but it could be a film actor who wanted to start a clothing company or a wine company or things like that. And what it is a platform that where you could do equity crowdfunding a project. So it's not just like, give me money for my movie and I'll send you a t-shirt or I'll give you a credit at the end. You could actually become part of the ownership group. And these things would typically get set up as LLCs, and you would get certain shares or in the LLC itself. So that was that's really what Fanvester was running. COVID hurt everything and stuff like that.
So Disney has a new hit TV show called The Mandalorian. I'm sure you've heard of it or watched it. And it's being filmed with an amazing new virtual production technology that uses these really tall LED screens to display the backgrounds on. And it uses software which originated in the gaming industry called the Unreal Engine. And if you're not familiar with it, you can go on YouTube and watch how Disney uses this process. It's stunningly beautiful. The final results are just amazing. When I first I thought this technology is going to change everything. Are you familiar with what they're doing over there, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm very familiar. I actually pay a lot of attention to that kind of stuff because, if you're going to be an entrepreneur in this business, you want every advantage you could get to compete against the big guys. So I love The Mandalorian. I watched The Mandalorian. I thought it was fabulous. I just thought it was great. And, streaming services in general, I think, have allowed a lot of creative people to really express their creativity in forms that were never made available to us before. So I'm in love with the streaming services. I think they've really done a great deal for producers and creators of projects. But Disney has done, they've got the best technology group out there, and they're way ahead of other people. And then people copy, see it like myself and go, oh my God, I better learn what they're doing because it's amazing. I mean, Mandalorian was just visually incredible.
Do you think that Silicon Valley's growing dominance in the technology sector and their ability to simulate these virtual worlds will allow them to eventually dominate Hollywood and the entertainment sector?
No, I got a very good lesson in dealing with Silicon Valley in my years working. I work with Microsoft, and then I work with Paul Allen's company, Digio, and stuff. While they certainly do get the technology stuff right, when it comes to creativity and understanding how audiences are and things like that, the cultures are just so different that I think they both need each other. I don't think one negates the other.
What's more challenging these days? Is it coming up with a highly unique idea, or is it getting the funding for those ideas?
It's coming up with a unique idea that is protectable. I always use this thing going, if I have an idea, the first question that comes in my mind is like, what is Rupert Murdoch going to do when he finds out that I'm going to do this? Can he step on me and overshadow me and stuff like that? And if I don't have something already in place, that protects me against Rupert, and I'm using Rupert as the symbol
Right,
for
right.
for that, then I typically won't go forward on the project unless I know I've got to protect it in some way. So a lot of stuff you see me do is very personality driven, where I get a personality that can't be duplicated. When I have a Greg Kinnear, it's not like Rupert's going to go out and find his own Greg Kinnear tomorrow, or things like that. So, or the subject matter. You buy book rights. And once you got those rights, you have those, and nobody could overshadow you.
So I keep hearing from A-list actors, writers, producers about how common it is for their projects and ideas to be stolen by agents, yes, top agencies, other actors, and studios themselves. Have you encountered a lot of that, or do you protect yourself with the methodologies you just described?
I protect myself, and it's the reason that I myself do not have an agent or a manager.
Yeah, I was shocked. For years, when I was starting out, I thought if I just got a high-level agency, an agent to handle this script or this project, the doors would fly open. And then you realize, then you hear about what's really going on, how these projects are stolen, they're appropriated, they're rebranded. It's epidemic out there. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen or heard or experienced it.
Yeah, I hear the horror stories too, and quite honestly, we've always protected ourselves against that kind of thing. Again, we don't have an agent, we don't have a manager, and stuff like that, and we don't go into something until we feel secure enough that we have it protected so that nobody could steal it.
Is it more or less difficult to sell a project to the streaming services these days than it was 5 or 10 years ago?
It's actually easier now because there are more streaming services. I just saw something the other day. There are actually over 50 significant streaming services platforms operating in the U.S. right now, and their appetites seem to be insatiable. For a producer, it's kind of become a dream. I watch television. I can't watch all the good stuff that's on. I mean, there's amazing stuff on television now. People say, "Oh, it's not television; it's streaming." Baloney. I watch it on my big screen, which is called the television. For writers, where you used to have to look at a story and go, "Can I cram this into a 2-hour film?" And then go, "You know what? The story is just too expensive, and I can't develop characters properly and stuff like that." Now with streaming services, they do these little mini series, anywhere from 4 to 12 episodes. So as a writer, you really get to do character development and story development in a much more creative way than you ever did before.
Yeah, take Narcos, for example. And because of Narcos and how successful it was, a lot of actors, A-level actors, now prefer to do those 10-episode series than a 2-hour motion picture. So,
yeah. I look at a show, one of my favorites is Ozark.
Yeah.
And, to me, Ozark is the modern day Godfather. The writing is incredible tight, and the acting is amazing. And the way they've done the character development, particularly of the Laura Linney character, I watch that and go, she's Michael Corleone. And just amazing stuff. I can't wait I'm looking forward to the last part of season 4. But on the other hand, I'm not looking forward to the fact that it's the end.
How often do writers and producers pitch new ideas or projects to you? Or do you prefer to source everything internally?
No, we love to do collaborative work. So we typically get pitched maybe 4 or 5 projects a week. Most of them we cut off in the first conversation. But again, you get to that issue of, people think, "Oh, this is a good idea and we could do it." And then you get to the realization about, things being stolen and not being able to protect them and things like that. So if we don't think you can protect it, we won't even look at it seriously. Then you get into the economics work, and is there a deal there that can be made, stuff like that.
You're familiar with the with the phrase unicorn in Silicon Valley. You know what that is, right?
Oh yeah.
So I've created 2 unicorns, and both of them were appropriated. Both one justifiably so, because I was on the payroll of a billionaire. So I was on their payroll, I created it, so they own it. The other was a far more complicated situation. So, I'm very, very aware of this phenomena. So we're still not seeing people going back to the movie theaters in any significant numbers. Do you think that's going to change? Because I'll tell you why I say that. All my sources are telling me we're headed to another more draconian lockdown after the midterm elections. And if that's the case, I suspect most movie theaters are done. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I think that regardless of whether or not we get hit with another big wave or, lockdown or whatever, I think the movie business has changed forever. I mean, it used to be everybody looked at, going, if you're in a theatrical film, you're at the top of the food chain. And I think with what COVID did, if there is a, kind of a positive side to the COVID thing, where a lot of people were reluctant to try out the Netflix and the Amazons and those things before, it made them sample those and go, oh my God, this stuff is really good. So I think the amount of time that people spend going to the movies has shrunken and will continue. I mean, I take myself, it used to be I could be, Friday afternoon and maybe I don't have a heck of a lot to do. I go, hey, I think I'll go to the movies. Not a particular movie, but I would go to the movies and I would look and see what's playing and go, oh, that looks okay. I'll go to that. Well, those days are over. I ain't never going just to the movies anymore. I mean, if it's like, the new Star Wars or something big and I want to see a Spider-Man, I want to see it in the movie theater. But, just going to the movies and picking something that you really don't know and hoping that it's good, that's not going to happen. So I think you see the shrinking of the multiplexes. I don't think anybody's going to need 16 movie screens any longer. So I think you'll see that shrink. And with that, I mean, it creates a ripple effect because if you think of mall ownership, used to have, an ArcLight on, or an AMC on one end of the mall and a Macy's or a Sears on the other, and those are gone. So I wouldn't want to be a mall owner these days because I think the shrinking of the movie going experience affects the malls a lot too.
Well, Larry, I want to thank you for being so generous with your time. Before we wrap things up, is there anything you would like to promote?
No, I'm doing a new thing now. I'm getting involved in the metaverse and the crypto world and doing that stuff. I'm helping some friends out of the fashion world, out of New York, start this thing called Beauty Queen, which is BTYKWN.com. Mm-hmm. And what it is, it's really a commerce, communications, content platform, really geared very heavily to the LGBTQI community there. And for me, it's fascinating getting to do like some of the craziest, most far out content programming that I've ever done. And it really is helping a group that has been underserved by, big media and stuff and giving them a voice in media, which makes me happy that I'm able to do that.
Well, thank you for coming on the John Ark Show. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, and you're always welcome back, my friend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.